Hello, everyone, and welcome to ChurchMilitant.tv's Losing My Religion, where we're sitting here talking with Father Lewis from the Fathers of Mercy. Hello, Father.
Mike.
And we're talking about the various problems in the church of self-identity and all of these different cultural markers, things that distinguish Catholics from everyone else. And how when you lose these things, or you lose touch of them, you don't understand the importance of them, how eventually you start to lose your religion as well, or you very much can. And we call these kinds of things like small t traditions as opposed to the big T traditions, which are the actual doctrines and teachings and dogmas of the faith. Lots of Catholics won't necessarily throw those things out, but they'll become very soft for them, right, Father?
Yes,
They'll get they won't really pay attention to them that much, and they start to lose the idea of what it is to be Catholic. So, like you were saying here off camera earlier, it's like when your mom used to say, you see a loose thread, and she said, don't pull that thread. You pull that thread, and eventually the shirt starts to fall apart.
Right.
And that's kind of what we're talking about here. So one of those things is the music that we play or hear or participate in or sing at Mass. Catholic Mass is what? What is the Mass?
The Holy Sacrifices of Mass is the continuation, the perpetualization, the representation and memorial of the sacrifice of the cross and of Calvary, and of the passion, death, resurrection, and last supper of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Okay. That's not just some old let's go in somewhere and sing and feel good and walk out, right?
No.
Right.
It's a summation of the Old and New Testaments and of the culmination of our Lord's sacrifice, which was promised to the Messiah from the time of the fall of Adam and Eve, of course, you know.
So we're talking about as big as you can get here.
Big as you can get.
So even Pope Benedict had said, as Pope John Paul had said also, Blessed John Paul had said also, that the music that happens around this type of music, even Vatican II said, Gregorian chant has place of primacy.
Always has.
Of place. The organ. I heard a wonderful comment from Pope Benedict that said, the piano plays and speaks to your feelings and your emotions, and the organ speaks to your intellect.
Right.
What a wonderful way to say that.
Yes, it is.
But specifically, in America, because the church in America, the Catholic Church in America, is a little island surrounded by Protestant tradition and, outnumbered 2.5, 3 to 1 by Protestants. And a lot of that stuff has seeped into the church, right?
No question about it.
So when we talk about hymns at church,
right.
Again, it's not talking about a sin. We're talking about things that mark you as Catholic.
Right.
How uncomfortable is it to hear one Protestant hymn after another at Catholic Mass?
Right. Well, totally, to me, because as a priest who celebrated, and as a missionary for 12 years, I've traveled the country and the world 35, 40 months, weeks of the year, and you can imagine the kind of, like one Chicago pastor said to me, Father Lewis, you've seen just about all, haven't you? And I says, yeah. Liturgically, all over the place. Well, first of all, it emphasizes and totally takes away the sacrificial nature of the Mass, just like we define what is the Mass. It's a sacrifice. It takes away the transcendental, the Christological, and the metaphysical, and the transcendental aspect of the Mass. It's supposed to lift you up. It's supposed to lift you up from time and space up to eternity.
And the reason that when you sing these hymns that aren't Catholic, is because those hymns come from a tradition which denies this.
That's right.
So, okay, you don't necessarily as a person have to have a conscious awareness of
that.
Right. But unconsciously it is working on you, isn't it?
Right. I mean, you sing Kumbaya, and you get into a kind of a Peter, Paul, Mary thing. Right. Believe me, growing up in the 60s, it's like, take this stuff and put it downtown.
Well, I used to play in a folk group.
Right.
I was there with the guitar when I was 14.
Right.
I'm there
Hootenanny
playing
masses, right?
Absolutely.
And then the priest comes in there and there's incense. God, Father, praise and glory. Well, you're in a whole different kind of transcendental mindset.
Absolutely.
Sacrificial and Christological.
Mm-hmm. And this isn't to say, oh, look at these horrible, evil, rotten Protestants.
No.
It's to say that their music, like whatever art they have and everything else, comes from a tradition rooted in a denial of Catholicism being the one true faith.
That's right. But it also has theological implications, because if you listen to some of that, it takes away from the sacerdotal and from the Eucharistic and from the real presence kind of aspect, and from the authentic mystical body of what we are as a mystical body. It takes away from that. It kind of seeps in there too.
Yeah, when you have a, when you have a hymn, for example, Amazing Grace. I mean, first of all, it's kind of if you just say it in sort of a offhanded kind of way, it's kind of the like the national anthem
Right.
of Protestantism, at least in the United States.
Right, right.
And it's how many Catholics can sit in Catholic Mass and sing that song,
Right,
but don't have the slightest idea about
Right.
Ave Maria.
right,
They would Panis Angelicus.
right, right.
Praise to the Lord the
Praise
Almighty.
to the Lord, the Almighty. I mean, right.
Yeah. And I think it's funny from a theological standpoint, what's different about some of these you hear, and a lot of this has come in sort of through it has been added to by like the Life Teen experience.
Right,
They're
sure.
playing a Christian bango, bongo.
And I was in there in Phoenix, right at the parish where it started, yeah.
Oh boy.
Yes, I know.
And what's wrong with it? Again, it's not like you're committing a sin. That's not
No.
the point. The point is this is an authentic expression of Catholicism.
And let's key in on that point, especially with the young, and I'm worried about this Life Teen thing and things like that. These kids come in there and they have this rock and roll kind of mass.
Yeah.
And I've said this many times. Look, folks, what are we doing to these young kids?
Yeah.
We're encouraging, well, we got to get them to the mass. Yes, but you're encouraging them to come to a mass that's a folk rock kind of
So
experience.
a concert.
A concert.
Yeah.
And what happens if they go in the place where they have a reverent mass with beautiful chant? Are they going to like that? Or you say, no, I don't want that. I want the rock and roll mass.
Yeah.
And they're losing that.
I was coming back from a trip, and I was sitting next to on the plane. There was a 15-year-old next to me.
Sure.
And nice kid, played football
Sure.
here in Michigan, at high school, and we were talking for a little bit. I asked him what religion he was. He was a Protestant denomination, and I said, "So what do you think of church?"
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, there's this one church that I go to. It's it's pretty good. They've got a great band there, and they've got these big screens, and and it's so I like going there." And I was thinking, there it is. There's the. I mean, you're going to let the expression of your faith
Right.
and the communion with the Almighty
Right.
be dictated by the dictates of a 14-year-old
Right.
and his likes and dislikes.
That's right.
Now,
That's right.
what's going on in his Protestant tradition and church is one thing, but you can't pull that into Catholicism and say, well, we got to have a PR campaign and get out there and play good tunes and get them
Right.
in. It misses the whole point.
And it's not something interesting, of course, being 60 years old and having the 1960s orientation, that the Protestant churches back then, they hated the rock and roll. They'd have all kinds of tracks, like the Jack Chick kind of thing.
Yeah.
Oh, this horrible rock and roll, and they'd have these rock and roll, that's a sin, God's whatever. And so they take that rock and roll now, and it's in their own tradition of worship. It's like, what happened? Where was the compromise here? It's a compromise with the culture
Yeah, it is.
that we brought into ourselves in many ways.
Do you think what's the most disturbing thing to you? Is it when it comes to the music? Is it largely the absence of Catholic music in parishes across the country, or is it the substitution of Catholic music with many of these kind of Protestant hymns?
Well, it's kind of both. A lot of substitution of Catholic, not just Protestant hymns, but also secular hymns and just basically rock and roll hymns, and then they put it in there. So there's not even a religious scintilla of religion and kind of religiosity there. Number one, and number two, the concomitant loss of reverence, and like everything's on the horizontal level, everything's on the human level instead of the transcendental level. And once you entered in that sacred space, like one Protestant person told me one time, says, "Father, if I believe what you believe about the real presence of the Eucharist, as soon as I go through those doors, I throw myself down and just crawl on my face before the altar."
It's a good point.
Yeah.
It's a very good point. I think one of the things, if you look at many of these, especially things for the younger,
Right.
people in Mass, these kind of, rock and, not necessarily rock and rolly, but you start this kind of swaying, feel good. It's all about my emotions, and if you pay attention to the words
Right.
in these kinds of songs, count how many times the word I,
Right.
we,
Right.
our,
Right.
me
Right.
pops up.
Right.
Those songs are really about us.
That's right.
There's very little reference. I mean, it's God's creation and I this and me that, and you go through a lot of those kind of Life Teen music songs and a lot of the kind of not Christian rock and roll, but kind of mainstream Protestant thing.
Sure.
They're all about me.
Right.
Very little reference directly to, hi God, I am honoring you and worshiping you
Right.
with this song.
Right.
It's me, it's I, it's us, it's we. And I noticed this at a couple of different masses I've been to, you know,
Right.
as I travel around, and they sing those songs. It was like all the personal pronouns
Right.
popped up
Absolutely.
off the page. There were like
Absolutely.
50 of them. I'm like,
Absolutely.
where's God in
The
this song?
transcendental.
It's gone.
And in fact, Cardinal Lorenze, he always used to go down to Louisville at the Church Teachers Forum, and that was part of the lay effort to keep what was left of the Catholic faith.
Mm-hmm.
And even above and beyond a lot of the bishops locally, they'd bring bishops and cardinals from all over. And he said, when we enter into the sacred space of church, is our orientation us? Is it human-centered, or is it divine-centered? Is it God-centered? And then we all have our orientation. So the whole orientation, there's a dissonance there, and it's taken away because it's all on the I, on the self, and God is kind of like that Protestant Buber, I and thou. No, it's not I and thou. It's our Lord Jesus Christ. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's
that
very.
openness.
It's a shame. Again, it's another one of those Catholic markers. Catholic music.
That's right.
Catholic music still. If you
Right.
hear that sacred music,
Right.
you're like, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa.
Yeah. You're in a whole different world, the mindset and orientation, and it has moral implications too,
Sure.
because it forces you to look deep inside of yourself
Mm-hmm.
and examine yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then, you know, there's some things like that. Well, I go to confession, I'll straighten myself out, you know, to prepare myself to receive our Lord. But also, from the perspective of a priest, there's a dissonance. Because, you know, you have this rock and roll kind of thing going, da-da-da. Then here's Father Louis Guardiola. All the music stops. In the name of the Father and of the Son. and all this rock and roll. And then there's, wow, what's this man?
Yeah. Ah, that priest and what he's doing is boring. Get back
Yeah.
to the fun music. Come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
But I'm also sending a message.
Yeah.
You know, offering the Mass reverently.
Mm-hmm.
This is my body given up for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so a priest can make a difference,
Mm-hmm.
but he has to be able to get through that and not become scandalized and work through it. And that's part of what we're doing as the Fathers of Mercy.
Yeah. I imagine there are aspects about the priesthood, the living out of the
Right,
priesthood
right.
now today that are very tough, that generations before didn't have to encounter those difficulties.
Right. Well, being a priest today, especially if you're a devout priest and you're authentically Catholic, it's like being a Marine hitting the beach at Iwo Jima. You fire from the left, fire from the right, fire from the front, fire from the back, fire from on top, you know.
Sometimes friendly fire.
Yeah, friendly fire. Yeah.
All right. Well, Father, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
You want to say put Catholic hymns back in Catholic churches, right?
Yes,
Not very hard.
yes. And some Latin hymnody would be pretty good too.
That would be nice too.
Yeah.
All right. Father Louis, thank you very much. This is our show, Losing My Religion, where we talk about all these various little things that are Catholic identity markers to help us realize who we are as Catholics and to grow in that faith and express it. And that's all these things are. That's why Catholics do this. We genuflect, we sing Catholic hymns, our churches are built a certain way with certain architectural things in them. All of these things express our Catholicism, what it is to be a Catholic. Thanks for joining us very much. We'll see you next week here on Losing My Religion. God love you.